Welcome, dear listeners, to Shadows at the Crossroads. Tonight, we invite you to step into a world where reality bends and the lines between parallel universes blur. Our story, titled Echoes of Another, unravels the tale of Emily, a resident of the quiet town of Eldridge, who finds herself waking up to a day that seems familiar, yet is laced with subtle, unsettling differences. Prepare to embark on a voyage through the shadows of possibility and the crossroads of fate. This is Echoes of Another, a glowing Monkey Systems original. In the quaint, serene town of Eldridge, Emily found herself waking to a day that whispered of the unfamiliar. The morning sun spilled through her curtains with a glow that seemed to paint the world in a slightly altered spectrum of colors. It was as if the very light had shifted, casting a different perspective on everything it touched. Outside, the familiar melody of bird songs that usually greeted her each day had changed. The notes were off-key, the rhythms altered, as if the birds themselves were singing songs from a distant place or time. It was a subtle change, yet it unsettled the rhythm of her morning. As Emily went about her usual routine, each step felt slightly askew. The kettle she used every morning seemed newer, the handle a different shade than she remembered. Her favorite mug, the one she used for her morning coffee, now had a crack running down its side, a scar she was certain hadn't been there the night before. The sense of dissonance grew as she glanced around her home. The photographs on the walls, snapshots of family gatherings, holidays, and cherished memories, were all tinged with the unknown. The faces of her loved ones were the same, yet their expressions held emotions or secrets that she didn't recognize. It was as if each photo captured a moment from a life similar to hers, yet not quite her own. And then there was Luna, her beloved cat, a constant in her life of quiet routine. Luna now sported a patch of white fur on her otherwise black coat, a striking change that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. She reached out to pet Luna, half expecting her to be different in some other way, but the cat purred and nuzzled into her hand just like always. With each passing moment, Emily's home felt less like the sanctuary it had always been, and more like a place subtly masquerading as her own. The air was filled with a sense of unspoken change, a silent acknowledgement that something fundamental in her world had shifted overnight. As she stood there in the quiet of her slightly altered home, Emily realized that the day ahead would be a journey to uncover the truth behind this unsettling feeling of an altered reality. As Emily stepped outside, the familiar landscape of Eldridge greeted her, yet it was tinged with subtle alterations that made her heart race with unease. The town, usually a tapestry of familiar sights and sounds, now felt like a painting that had been slightly altered by an unknown artist. The most jarring change was the old oak tree in the town square. This towering giant, under whose sprawling branches Emily had spent countless lazy summer days reading and daydreaming, had inexplicably moved. It now stood on the opposite side of the street, its mighty trunk and gnarled branches casting a foreign shadow on a new patch of ground. Emily stared at it, feeling a surreal sense of displacement. This tree had been an anchor in her life, a symbol of enduring stability, and now even it had shifted. Walking towards her favorite coffee shop, Emily braced for a familiar comfort, but what greeted her was another wave of disquiet. The sign above the door bore a new name, the Roasted Bean, replacing the daily grind sign she had known for years. Inside, the layout was the same, but the colors of the walls were different, and the artwork that adorned them was unfamiliar. The barista, a young man who had always greeted her with a warm smile and "The usual, Emily?" now looked at her with polite indifference, waiting for her to place her order, as if she were just another customer. Around her, the murmur of conversations filled the air, but the words seemed out of tune. People spoke of events that Emily couldn't recall ever happening, mentioning names of local politicians she didn't know, and referring to recent town developments that were news to her. The faces were familiar, but the stories they shared were not part of the Eldridge she knew. With each step through the town, Emily felt like a stranger wandering through a world that was eerily similar to her own, yet fundamentally different. The realization that she might be standing in a version of Eldridge that was not her own began to take root in her mind, a possibility as frightening as it was fascinating. As she walked through the altered streets of her town, a determination set in her heart. She needed to understand what had happened, and more importantly, how she could return to the world she knew. Emily's mind was a whirlwind of confusion as she made her way back to her home, seeking solace in its familiarity. Yet, the feeling of being a stranger in her own life only intensified when she stumbled upon an anomaly on her bookshelf, an old leather-bound journal she had no memory of ever acquiring. Its presence among her collection of novels and memoirs was incongruous, a silent intruder in her personal space. With tentative fingers, she opened the journal, her eyes widening in disbelief as she recognized her own handwriting filling the pages. But the content was unfamiliar, a narrative that paralleled her life yet diverged in significant ways. There were entries about her family, friends, and events, but they were skewed, describing moments she had never lived and decisions she had never made. The journal spoke of relationships with people she had never met, detailing emotions and experiences that were hers in essence, but not in memory. It outlined a career path in a field she had once considered, but ultimately decided against pursuing. There were mentions of trips to places she had only dreamed of visiting and achievements she had never accomplished. As Emily leafed through the pages, a chilling realization dawned on her. This journal was a chronicle of an alternate version of herself, a life that ran parallel to her own, but had branched off in different directions. It was as though each decision she had faced in life had split her path, and this journal belonged to an Emily who had taken different turns. The discovery left her with more questions than answers. How did this journal find its way into her home? Was it possible that the feeling of dissonance she had experienced since waking up was because she had somehow crossed into a parallel universe, one where her life had taken different routes? The journal, with its intimate yet foreign entries, became a puzzle she was desperate to solve. It held clues to the life of another Emily, a life that mirrored her own yet was distinct in its essence. As she sat there, surrounded by the paradox of familiarity and strangeness, Emily knew she had to unravel the mystery of this journal and the altered reality she found herself in. Determined to untangle the enigma of her altered reality, Emily sought the wisdom of Mrs. Whitaker, a local historian known for her extensive knowledge of Eldridge's past. Mrs. Whitaker lived in an old Victorian house at the edge of town, its walls lined with ancient books and artifacts that spoke of a deep, almost mystical understanding of the town's history. As Emily explained her bizarre experiences and the mysterious journal, Mrs. Whitaker listened intently, her eyes reflecting a mixture of intrigue and recognition. Once Emily finished, the historian nodded slowly, her voice taking on a solemn tone as she delved into the lore of Eldridge. She spoke of legends passed down through generations, tales that suggested Eldridge was more than just a quaint town. According to these legends, Eldridge was built upon what the ancients called thin places, rare locations on Earth where the fabric of reality was so delicate that it allowed for the existence of portals to parallel universes. These portals, invisible and intangible, were said to exist in places where the boundary between worlds was weak, allowing for an unwitting passerby to slip through. Mrs. Whitaker described how these thin places were revered and feared, often associated with supernatural occurrences and unexplainable phenomena. The legends spoke of people who had experienced shifts in reality, much like what Emily described, after encountering these thin places. As Emily absorbed this information, a mixture of fear and fascination gripped her. The idea that she might have crossed through one of these veils into a parallel universe seemed like something out of a fantasy novel. Yet the events of the past day aligned eerily with the legends Mrs. Whitaker recounted. The realization that she might be living proof of these ancient tales sent a shiver down her spine. The historian offered no solutions, but suggested that if Emily had indeed crossed through a veil, it might be possible to return. The legends hinted that these crossings were not permanent, that the veil's fluid nature might allow passage back to one's original world. But they also warned of the unpredictability of such journeys. Armed with this knowledge, Emily left Mrs. Whitaker's house with a new purpose. She needed to find one of these thin places to seek a way back to her own reality. The journey ahead would be one of discovery and uncertainty, but Emily was resolved to uncover the truth behind the legends of Eldridge and the mysterious shift in her life. As Emily continued to live in this subtly altered version of Eldridge, she gradually learned to adapt to its nuances. Each day became a journey of discovery, unveiling small but significant differences that set this world apart from her own. She began to notice the unique beauty in these variations, finding a sense of wonder in the unfamiliarity that now colored her daily life. In this parallel, Eldridge, the cafe she frequented, served a different blend of coffee, one that was unexpectedly richer and more flavorful. The bookstore she loved had a section of books by authors she'd never heard of in her world, offering her new literary worlds to explore. The park where she usually jogged had a path that curved differently, leading her to a serene pond teeming with colorful fish, a hidden gem she had never known in her original universe. Emily's interactions with the people around her took on a new depth. Conversations with neighbors and acquaintances revealed different histories and experiences, painting a picture of a community that was similar yet distinct from the one she remembered. She found herself engaging in discussions that challenged her perspectives, leading to friendships that were unexpectedly fulfilling. The more time she spent in this world, the more Emily realized that the life she was leading was brimming with possibilities that her previous existence had not offered. She began to see her situation not as a disorienting predicament, but as an opportunity to experience life from a fresh vantage point. In her parallel life, Emily discovered hobbies she never knew she would enjoy, tried foods she had never tasted before, and even started learning a new language spoken in this version of Eldridge. Her days were infused with a sense of adventure and learning, and she found herself embracing this new reality with an open heart and an open mind. Yet, despite the newfound joy and enrichment, a part of Emily yearned for the familiarity of her original world. The duality of her feelings created an inner conflict, a longing for home, yet a fascination with the new experiences this world offered. As she navigated through this journey of self-discovery and exploration, Emily held on to the hope that she might one day find her way back, armed with the rich experiences and insights gained from her time in this parallel universe. As twilight descended on Eldridge, Emily found herself drawn to the town square, where the oak tree, a symbol of both change and constancy, stood bathed in the soft, luminescent glow of the evening. Under its sprawling branches, now oddly positioned on this side of the street, she felt a connection to both her worlds, the familiar and the unfamiliar. Mrs. Whitaker's words echoed in her mind, painting her thoughts with possibilities and uncertainties. The local historian had spoken of a rare celestial alignment, an event that occurred once in several decades, which had the potential to weaken the barriers between parallel worlds. According to the legends, this astronomical phenomenon could reopen the passage between realities, offering a window for Emily to return to her original world. As she sat beneath the oak tree, its leaves whispering secrets in the gentle night breeze, Emily pondered her choice. This parallel Eldridge had grown on her, its differences weaving into the fabric of her daily life. She had discovered new aspects of herself here, embraced opportunities she had never considered, and formed connections that were unique to this reality. The thought of leaving behind the new paths she had walked was tinged with a sense of loss. Yet the pull of her original life was strong. The familiarity of her old world, with its unexplored dreams and unfulfilled promises, beckoned her. She longed for the comfort of her own home, the company of her friends and family, and the simple joys of her everyday routine. The possibility of stepping back into that life to pick up where she had left off was a beacon of hope. The decision weighed heavily on her heart. Staying meant embracing the richness of a life filled with newfound experiences and perspectives, a life that had surprised and changed her in countless ways. Returning meant reuniting with the world she had always known, with all its imperfections and uncharted possibilities. As the stars began to align in the night sky, signaling the approach of the celestial event, Emily realized that her choice was not just about choosing between two worlds. It was about choosing the life she wanted to lead, the person she wanted to be. Under the luminescent glow of the oak tree at the crossroads of her destiny, Emily closed her eyes and made her choice. The path we walk is often filled with shadows and whispers of other lives, other choices. In the story of Emily and the town of Eldridge, we find a reminder that the world is full of mysteries, some hidden just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. Thank you for joining us on this journey through shadows at the crossroads. Until next time, keep your eyes open for those subtle differences that might just lead you to another world.